expected. And the person who thought he had won the election, not to give my the story away. So that's what I thought I'd do, is just not read any of the very serious stuff, since a lot of very, very interesting, I wouldn't call it entirely frivolous stuff, but sort of frivolous on the surface stuff has been said here, but tremendously meaty stuff has been said. So I shall do something that is not meaty so much as garnishy. Now, young officer, these guys, the idea of the staggered election, which has been with us ever since, and with all these election officers being sent here and there. Okay, whose wife are you? Asked Sandeep Lahiri, who was the presiding officer at one of the many polling stations in Salimpur. How can I take his name? Asked the burqa-clad woman in a shocked whisper. It is written on that slip of paper which I gave you before you left the room just now. Sandeep looked down at the slip of paper, then once more at the voting list. Fakhruddin, you are Fakhruddin's wife, from the village Noorpur Khurd. Yes, yes. You have 4 children, don't you? Yes, yes, yes. Out! Said Sandeep sternly. He had already ascertained that the real woman in question had 2 children. Strictly speaking, he should have handed the woman over to the police, but he didn't feel her offence merited such stern action. Only once had he had recourse to the police in this election. That had been a few days earlier, when a drunken man in Rudhia had threatened a member of his his polling party and had tried to tear up a copy of the electoral rolls. Sandeep enjoyed being away from Brahmpur. His work in the Department of Mines was dull and desk-bound compared to his earlier responsibilities out in the subdivision. This election work, though for the most part also performed at a desk, provided a refreshing respite, and he got to see once again the areas that, for all their backwardness, he had grown to feel such affection for. He looked around the room at a torn map of India and a chart of the Hindi alphabet. The polling station happened to be a local school. There were sounds of an argument from the adjoining classroom, where the men's booth was located. Sandeep got up to find out what the matter was. Sorry, is the light going on? Okay. Find out what the matter was, and was faced with an unusual sight. A beggar who had no hands was intent on casting his vote, and on doing so unaided by anyone. He refused to be accompanied into the curtained area, insisting that the officer would reveal whom he had voted for. The polling officer was arguing with him, but to no avail, and the flow of voters had halted outside the classroom while voices rose hotly from within. The beggar said that the polling officer should fold his ballot paper for him and put it between his teeth. Then he himself would go behind the curtain and insert it in the box of his choice. I can't do that, said the officer. Why not? Insisted the beggar. Why should I let you come in with me? How do I know you're not one of the Nawab Sahib's spies or the ministers? He added hastily. The Sandeep made a quiet gesture to the polling officer, indicating that he should allow the man's request. The beggar performed his electoral duty for both Parliament and the Legislative Assembly. When he emerged for the second time, he gave the officer a contemptuous snort. The officer was quite miffed. Wait a second, said another officer, we forgot to mark you with the ink. You'll recognize me if you see me again, said the beggar. Yes, but you might try to vote somewhere else. It's a rule. Everyone has to have their left forefinger marked. The beggar snorted again. Find my left forefinger, he said. The entire polling party appeared to be held at bay by one man. I have the answer to that, Sandeep told his officer with a smile, turned to a page of his instructions and read out. Any reference in this rule, here again Sukumar Sen has anticipated every possibility, any reference in this rule or in Rule 23 to the left forefinger of an elector shall, in the case where the elector has his left forefinger missing, be construed as a reference to any other finger of his left hand, and shall, in the case where all the fingers of his left hand are missing, be construed as a reference to the forefinger or any other finger of his right hand, and shall, in the case where all his fingers of both the hands are missing, be construed as a reference to such extremity of his left or right arm as he may possess. He dipped the glass rod into the phial of ink and smiled weakly at the beggar, who, defeated by the labyrinthine brains of the Raj-trained drafters of the Ministry of Law, held out his left stump with very bad grace.
Thank you, Vikram. Okay, questions, and if these lights could be dimmed a bit, can we dim these lights so we can actually see the audience? I remember Vikram having serious problems the other day. Let's start from here and work our way there. So further back, that over there. Yes, please stand up. Can you give her the microphone, please?
Good evening. My question is that with more and more regional parties coming up in the scenario, it's very difficult to get the magic number, the clear mandate. So what do you suggest that the Indian politics is actually moving towards more bargaining and more barter system? Because of course they are going to, provide, if I should say, packages that please support me and I'm going to give you the further, kind of perks. So what do you suggest that our politics is actually moving towards? And another question which I have is, there was a kind of controversy a few days back when Arvind Kejriwal retweeted a tweet. I don't know if you guys know about it. So what I want to ask is that on one hand, we, the people, we want our leaders to be like us, to be the common men. That's why Aam Aadmi Party won in Delhi. And on other hand, why are we so hell-bent on isolating them from us? I mean, if I can retweet a tweet, I can call Rahul Gandhi a moron or whatever. No one is going to come and, tell me something. I can't say the same about Mamata Banerjee here, but then Rahul Gandhi is okay. So why are we isolating them? These are my two questions.
Mark, you want to take that first?
First, I'm not quite sure about the isolating one, really. But the first one, I think it's very important to realize that two of the governments which have done the most to change the situation, both of them have been minority governments. Narasimha Rao and Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. They haven't all been a total mess like the UPA, the present government has been, where there had been consistent surrender to pressures from within the coalition. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And if I go back to what I said earlier about absolute power, I think that a coalition system which works well and which has sensible leaders in it can be a much better thing quite often than a one-party government.
I recently wrote about a sort of honest instability, but Ram, what would you say to?
Yeah, I live in Bangalore, which means that I tend to look at things from the perspective of the states. And the way Indian democracy is evolving, more party means more parties, more regional parties, weakening of major national parties is actually a sign of the deepening decentralization of Indian democracy. So there'll be these, complicated scenarios where you have coalition governments, some do well, some don't do so well, as Mark pointed out. But what you really have to look for is stable two-party regimes in the states which alternate. If you look at the states, in my view, speaking as a historian and sociologist, if you look at the numbers and you look at economic and social and other indicators, the three best states of India, Gujarat is not one of them, are Himachal Pradesh, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. If you look at economic, and you all have stable two-party regimes. The communists come, and the Congress comes in Kerala, and in Himachal, the Congress and the BJP. And it's like the British system. You can be a kind of check on each other. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to say is, one of the problems with the Indian elections is that they're free, fair, the organization is good, but funding is completely not transparent. The criminalization of many parties. And there's an outstanding organization called the Association for Democratic Reforms, which has outlined a series of excellent suggestions. Part of the reason we know why there are so many criminals in Parliament is because the ADR filed a PIL in the Supreme Court. And they have I'll leave you with just one last recommendation of theirs. They say that we now have electronic voting machines. So what we can do, one of the problems with elections is, even if a party comes to power or a candidate wins in, say, Brahmpur, he would win with 31% of the vote because it's a five-corner contest. So they say that you can have it every single assembly or parliamentary constituency. If the person wins with more than 50% of the vote, he or she is declared elected. If they don't win, you can have a runoff within 3 days. Technology exists between the first and the second place candidates, which will mean actually the chap who you choose represents the bulk of the constituency. So there are ways in which you get, and of course, election funding and so on and so forth. So I think there are many ways in which we need to improve the functioning of elections. When we are a young democracy, it'll take time. But meanwhile, focus on the states and forget about the center. Or don't place so much importance on the center.
Rishi, may I just continue on a point?
I have a question, sir. May I?
One second. Vikram,
This
Vikram wants to add something.
last point that you made about getting 50% or more at some stage is a very interesting one, because I come from a state, well, and many states are like this, where there was a kind of, for the parliamentary election, I come from Noida, or Noida, as my father calls it.
I didn't know that was a state.
Well, not really. It's
It
a
thinks
state.
it
It's
is,
a
no?
state of mind. So it's in UP. I think it's kind of schizophrenic. It's both part of the national capital. But the parliamentary elections created a kind of Four Seasons pizza of four parties, and the assembly election, which was largely at that stage, was the BSP, the Mayawati. She ruled for a while. Was recently, well, not recently, a year and a half, replaced by the Socialist Party. Now, the Socialists have got only about 35% of the vote, and the BSP got about 25, BJP got, I think, 14, and Congress got 12. But basically what it meant was this, that if there had been any other coalition before the election, right, before the election, then there's no way that they would have, with 35% of the votes, in a first past the post system, have won in more than 50% of the constituencies. It wouldn't have happened. Now you might say it's rather unfair that if 65% of the people have not voted for you, and you're only 35%, and you're actually running without a coalition partner, that's unfair. Now there are one or two ways of dealing with it. One is rather complicated. You make various preferences, first preference. But the second thing of simply having a runoff is not a bad system at all. Because at the moment it seems to me that part of our problem is not so much the fact that you have, I mean, you have to have, if you have post-election, what are they called, coalitions, it's quite different from having a pre-election coalition, because you're both placed in a much, much weaker position. And that is one of the problems that is going to beset us now. Everyone is jockeying, and they know it. But their enmities and hatreds are so strong that they'd rather finally play with fewer cards at the end than make the sensible thing and field fewer candidates of their own and agree that they'll agree with someone else in advance. It is a big problem, actually. And I think part of the problem now is, who is the protest vote against? That is the anti-Congress vote going to be divided? Is the anti-BJP vote going to be divided? And if you had a system such as the one that was suggested by the organization you mentioned, then that terrible tactical problem would not have to be dealt with. Now, I know that in Delhi, many people, friends of mine, said they were going to vote for the Aam Aadmi Party. So I said, well, did you vote for them? Well, they said no. I have one friend who actually said he voted for the BJP because he hated Congress so much. I said, I'm never going to talk to you again. He said, well, come on, have another vodka. And then, but there were several people who voted for the Congress, though they would have rather voted for the Aam Aadmi Party because they were afraid the BJP would come in. Later, there was a poll taken, and with all the usual caveats about the poll, it turned out that about 60% of the people would have voted for the BJP if they thought their vote wouldn't have been wasted. Now, had that happened, and this is the reason why both the BJP and the Congress were desperate that a government be formed and a new election not be called, was because 60% would mean a complete wipeout in something like, I'd say, 85 to 90% of the constituencies. That is the situation in a first-past-the-post system, which throws all kinds of, well, I said before, googlies in the works, because of this peculiar business of what is a mandate. Now, sorry, I should...
Right, okay.
Yes,
There was a
I have a question, sir.
Just 1 second, please. That hand over there, please. Oh, there. Yeah, thank you. There.
Sir, may I ask the question?
Wait, I've just asked that person to ask the question. Who's got the microphone on this side? What? Only have time for some. I'm being democratic between the sectors of the audience here. Yeah, please go
I
ahead.
wanted to ask, taking off from this first past the post system that we have, would it have been better if we had a proportional representation system?
You know, would it be better if we had a presidential system proposed? You know, all these were debated. A decision was taken in good faith. It may have been wrong, but we can't change the system now. We can only refine and improve it, which is why I suggested what I did.
Why can't we go back to, why can't we now that we're a more mature democracy do a French thing?
You need a constitutional amendment, you need 2/3 and so on. So that's the first reason. The second reason is actually with the refinement suggested by the Association of Democratic Reforms, what the first past the post system does is since you have to get more than 50% votes in your constituency, you have to actually appeal on a platform which is about welfare and development. It is not Jats plus Gujars minus Dalits plus someone minus someone. So, you know, of course, you know, democracy is essentially about what economists call the second best alternative. You know, it's, you can't have proportion. Because you need we could have had it if the Constituent Assembly, in its wisdom, in 47, 48, when they debated it, had done it. Now you'll have to wait till you get a Lok Sabha with someone having 400 seats, a leader who's committed to it, and then bring it about.
But
so
Ram, you'll have to have a constitutional amendment even for this change that you suggested.
no, according to the ADR,
You can just do it by a straightforward 50% vote of parliament.
according to the ADR, the Election Commission and Parliament between them can do it. I recommend.
Okay.
I don't know that.
I think there is, if I could just add one very quick point. Actually, one of the features of proportional representation is that it leads to coalition governments. So if you don't like coalition governments, then you don't want proportional representation.
Right in front of
May
me.
I ask my question?
Wait.
Sir, I have been asking you, may I?
Yes, I know, but I'm trying to spread it around. I'm trying to spread it around the audience. I can't even see you.
Sir, I'm in the middle. Can you see me right now?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, be a little more democratic. Yeah, thank you so much.
I can't
Okay.
see. I'm blind as any voter. Huh?
Okay, my question is, do you think mediatization of politics is another reason why I'm asking you this question is, like last assembly election here in West Bengal, there was a leading newspaper. I remember that same newspaper declared Buddhadev Bhattacharya as the brand Buddhadev Bhattacharya. And that same leading newspaper gave out a picture showing Buddhadev, before election I'm talking this, okay? The same newspaper showed a picture.
Yeah, go ahead over there, where I'm pointing. Thank you.
So you mentioned citizen movements down south, okay? And in some parts of the country, especially Bangalore, we see these citizen movements led by commercial or industrial houses trying to engage with electoral issues. So like in Bangalore, we have Janagraha and BPAC trying to get everybody to vote and things like that. So what are we looking at and how does it tie into issues of electoral funding?
I'll let the Tamilian answer here. Go on.
Well, you know, I don't think all corporates are bad, all industrialists are bad, for example. So, you know, if they are public-spirited industrialists who enter the democratic process, so be it. I mean, that's fine. As long as they're transparent, the source of their funding is transparent. But what I had in mind was something else. I've talked about the Aam Aadmi Party and its possible extension. And actually, I had in mind an example not from Bangalore, but from Hyderabad, which is Lok Satta. Now, which is an established party with one MLA and some panchayat representatives. And there could be other groups in Bangalore too. I mean, there's all, Lok Satta also has, incidentally, as you probably know, a Karnataka chapter. They put up candidates last time. And what would be interesting to watch is how the Aam Aadmi Party goes about this. You know, do they say that Lok Satta has to merge with us? Maybe. But then Kejriwal is the sovereign leader and Jaiprakash Narayan can only be his number 2. You know, there are all kinds of questions that have to be worked out. But I think what the larger point I was trying to make is, it follows on what Vikram says. I mean, what Vikram says is absolutely true. I mean, all of us see it, at least, that people vote for the BJP because they detest the dynasty, not because they like the BJP. And people vote for the Congress because they detest the Sangh Parivar and the Hindutva brand of intolerant politics, not because they like the Congress party. So what Aam Aadmi Party has really captured that third space, which is not sectarian, not based on caste, not based on Gundaism, but young, idealistic people, slightly confused, slightly disorganized, but young, idealistic, not corrupt, and not bound down by sectarian politics. How do you expand? That's really what I was trying to get at. And Mark is absolutely right. Timing. Don't fight too many seats next time, don't fight too few. But what is the golden mean between too many and too few? And that's where these links with citizens' movements in the East and the South become important.
I'll leave the last word to Mark, and then we have to wrap up.
I don't think I've got anything more to say. I think.
Well, okay then.
What about Vikram saying something? Well, perhaps I just say one thing. I would say that don't worry about what happens in this election. It will all turn out all right in the end.
A fatalistic Englishman. I love that. Thank you all very much, Mark, Ram, Vikram, and all of you. Good night.